So really glad that you are here. My name is Becca Shelton, and I am a career advisor here at the University of Richmond. I work to provide career guidance and support for all of our alumni, as well as our SPCS and MBA students and alumni of those programs. So today we are going to be talking about incorporating your transferable skills into your resumes and cover letters. The economic changes that have happened over the last few months that were really unexpected, it may have you thinking of changing careers, or maybe you were unfortunately put in that situation when you didn't expect to be. But either way, career changes require a really good deal of consideration, and it's also really important when you're thinking about a career change or if you're going through one to be really thoughtful about your application materials when you're applying for jobs outside of your given industry. Before we dive into the content, a few things to note for our webinar today, just some sort of managerial things. If you do have questions at any point, I will be pausing a couple times throughout the presentation for questions, also so I can get a sip of water. If you have questions, please go ahead and use the Q&A function that's down there at the bottom of your screen instead of the chat. The Q&A function just helps me to better manage and be more efficient with answering questions, and I can see what we have coming in when. Chat's just a little bit harder to sort of go back and see things. But you can feel free to use chat to chat with each other if you would like. You can also submit questions anonymously if you prefer. So appreciate it. Looks like we have some really good folks coming in, which is awesome. And so we will go ahead and get started. So what we'll cover today, this is one webinar and part of our career pivots, career changers series, excuse me. And we'll be talking a little bit about transferable skills in the beginning, and then I'll talk, the bulk of what I'll talk about will be resume formats and tips, as well as information on cover letters and how you can incorporate your transferable skills into those documents. Like I said, I will pause periodically for questions. My contact information is down there at the bottom. Feel free to email me directly if you have any follow-up questions, or if you want more resources, or if you would like to chat one-on-one in an appointment. And you can also feel free to call my office line if you would like. It is of course worded because we're all working from home, as you can see. Before we dive into the heart of our content today, I wanted to spend just a minute telling you all, if you are coming to this program and not having used career services as an alumni, or if you are a current student, these are some of the things that I can work with you on. And I always like to do this if you're new to us, so you know what the breadth of resources are that you have. So a lot of the work, my work is mostly split up between one-on-one career advising appointments, as well as providing content like this and other types of content, programmatic stuff for you to learn things. So we can really cover a variety of topics in our one-on-one sessions if you want to. We can talk about action plans, we can talk about specifics of job searching, we can do resume and cover letter reviews, networking. If it's been a while since you've job searched and maybe the application portals and those kind of things are a little bit confusing, we can chat about that. We can do mock interviews. It's a lot of stuff. I have some people that I work with consistently, and we meet once a week or once every other week, and there are some people that I work with that we meet sort of as needed. So you can let me know what kind of support you need. Over there on the right, we have a lot of resources. We have Spider Connect, which does a lot of things for us in career services, and that includes job opportunities and postings, events and workshops where you can sign up for that, and also it's how you schedule an appointment with me. So if it's been a while, or maybe you have no idea what Spider Connect is, feel free to email me and ask me how you can get set up with that, and I'll be happy to walk you through it so you can schedule an appointment and do other stuff in there. And we do have some of the resources there, but I don't want to spend a ton of time on this because I do want to get into the heart of the information that we're going to be covering today. But if you have any questions on this, feel free to send me an email. So I want to start off with a little bit talking about transferable skills. Sort of what are they? I know that some of you all out there might already have an idea of this. Maybe you already have a sense of what your transferable skills are. But if you are coming to me today and you're not exactly sure, oh, I know what transferable skills are important, but I'm not exactly sure how to identify the ones for me. Feel free, I think this content will still be helpful for you today, but feel free to get in touch with me, and I've got some slides and information that I can send you, and we can work together one-on-one if you would like to help to try to really hone in and identify your transferable skills. But they are a broad-based set of skills that apply to a lot of industries and jobs. They are sort of the typical bigger picture words that you would think of, like communication, problem solving, customer service. These are things that can be applied to almost every industry out there, and every specific industry and role, these would all look different. Like communication would look different in one industry versus another. Where can you put these in your application materials? You can put them in a lot of places. You can put them, and this is where we'll be diving into in just a little bit. You can put them on the summary and skills sections, related skills. You can incorporate them into your bullet points, which I definitely recommend. And I have some good material in just a little bit to talk about bullet point development, as well as cover letters, which are really important. I just gave a really, really sort of basic example over there on the right, where transferable skills come in handy. And so, if you work in management in a restaurant, there's a lot of things that you do, those roles do, that are very similar to what HR professionals do. So just a really, like I said, a very basic example to sort of demonstrate. So I wanted to dive into a little bit more, if you are sort of new to the idea of transferable skills, or maybe they're a little bit fuzzy for you, and just a little bit, this example sort of demonstrates how they play out. So again, if you're, if in this example, somebody is looking to move from food service to some kind of HR role, maybe not a journalist, maybe something else. But the things that are highlighted in red there, they really demonstrate where you see overlap, right? These things that are in red are the same basic responsibilities and skill sets, but they are played out a little bit differently depending on the role that you're in. So a restaurant manager does provide customer service. They do work in a lot of different settings. They hire, train, and supervise restaurant employees a lot of times, and they also ensure that all employees in the restaurant are adhering to operating standards. And that's a lot of the same work that an HR professional does. They work on onboarding new employees. Maybe they even write onboarding plans and orientation plans for different departments. They create and post job descriptions, and they manage employee records and disciplinary actions. And so a lot of those things have a lot of overlap. And I just wanted to make sure that I put that out there, just so it was a sort of a demonstration to see, you could see what was going on with that. This slide really focuses on understanding the job descriptions. And while it might not seem relevant to the content today, this is relevant when you are thinking about how, identifying your transferable skills, and then how do you incorporate them? Because understanding the job description, that really is your roadmap. The job description is the employer telling you, look, this is what we want to see in successful candidates in this role. And so this is what you would want to use to then it informs the type of the content and the skills that you highlight in your resume and cover letter. So my first piece of advice when you're sitting down to look at a job to apply for is save a copy of that job description. Maybe this is a practice that you use, maybe it's something that you never even thought about before, but go ahead and save a copy of that, because again, it is your roadmap and it will be a really good reference later. Oftentimes, it might be a few weeks to a couple months before an employer calls somebody for an interview since the time that you applied for that. And at that point, you might have applied for so many other jobs that you need another reminder of what this job is about. So save that. But getting into the nitty-gritty of the job descriptions, using the About Us section, if they do have it. The tough thing about job descriptions is that there's not a standard template that every employer uses. So you got to kind of take what you get. Sometimes you get a few sentences, sometimes you get a page. It just depends. So if they have an about us, use that to start for company research, you know, trying to get a sense of what they're all about, what's important to them, how you could align with that. If they have preferred and required qualification sections, or if they just have a qualifications section, definitely take a look at that. You can pretty much bet that the top few bullet points they put in those sections, if they have two separate ones or just one, those are going to be pretty important. I always say that you're never going to see other duties as assigned at the top of a list because it's not their priority, right? But they throw that in there. But the top few bullet points are really, that's going to be telling you where are their priorities in terms of the skills and the things that they need this role to do. So you want to use this information as a way to address what they are really looking for in your materials. If you meet most of their qualifications, this is, I think that's always a green light. My personal is the 70-30 rule. If you meet about 70%, like just over half, I would say go ahead and apply for it if you make a good case for yourself. I always put this in there because there are a lot of folks out there that I talk to, and I've been doing this for a long time, that they will, you know, if they don't feel like they check every single one of those boxes for that employer, then they're not going to apply for it. And I've gotten jobs before personally. I know other people that have gotten jobs when they've applied and thought, well, you know what, look, I can make a really good case for myself, and I might not hit every single box that they have on there, but I'm going to try anyway, right? Because you never know. So go ahead and try. And the last thing I have here is just look for repeats. So when you're looking at the job description, if you're seeing multiple words that are the same, that's important to them. But if they're saying the same thing in other ways, that's also a really important skill or attribute that you should be looking for. I'm going to pause because we have a question. Are we already on the outs if they say Spanish speaker preferred? Because here in California, they'll always be able to find one. So I think when you're looking at those kind of things, preferred, if you are in an area like you're in California and you know that there are a lot of folks with that qualification, it's tough because you kind of have to think, is the candidate pool, you know, if you think most of the candidate pool is going to have that qualification, then that's probably going to be something that they're going to take into serious consideration. So if they have a lot of people that meet that preferred qualification, they might not look at people that don't have it. And so that's, I think, something that you have to take on a case-by-case basis with the jobs that you look at. So let me know if that helped you or if you want some more clarification on that answer. So the last thing I have here is make a list and connect the dots. So when you are looking at that job description, taking some notes for yourself to think about, based on what I'm seeing here in this job description, what are the top, 3 to 4, maybe 5 strongest things that they're looking for, and see where that aligns with your transferable skills and where you can make overlaps and you have similarities. That's where you want to focus, especially in your cover letter, with providing examples with results in that. The last little tidbit I have here when you're looking at descriptions, use a word cloud. I love them. And that can really, because when you're looking at it, sometimes it's too much to take in at once. And the word cloud can help you to really be able to suss out, what are some really important words that maybe they keep using, or some similar keywords and phrases. Thank you for your question, Holly. I will get to that in just a moment. Okay, so I forgot that I had a pause for questions. So I'm going to take a sip of water and then I will get to your question. And if you have any others out there, feel free to put them in the Q&A. Okay, looks like we had a couple come in, which is awesome. Somebody asked, at what age or experience level should I consider adding a more detailed skills section? Okay. That's a really good question, really legit. And I would beg to say that it does not necessarily matter the age. It matters more the experience level. Should you put more details in the skills? I think it really just depends on what do you have to communicate. and what is that job, what is that role asking for that you're applying for. So definitely people with, and again, it depends on how much you've done and the number of years you've been working, but usually people with 5-ish or more years of experience have a decent amount of, skills and other attributes that they can communicate. So that might give you a little bit of, understanding on that. But I would say it really more depends on what specific things do you have to communicate that's important for that reader. So I hope that's helpful. We had another question, a couple more. What about experience requirements? Is it worth it to apply for jobs where you are short of what they ask for? What if your tasks match what they ask for, but your title does not? Okay. Again, I'm a big fan of the 70-30 rule. If you hit most of them, or just like a little over half, then that's pretty good. And I would say in your specific question, what about if your tasks match what they ask for, but your title does not? It's tough. Okay, so besides certain industries, the one I can think of is federal government, where you have like really standardized job titles. Especially in my industry, job titles you might have some standardization, but some some places within your industry that you could work at would call them one thing, and then you could look at another place that calls it something else, but it sort of does the same thing. So title match, depending on your industry, doesn't always necessitate whether you are qualified for that. And I hope that makes sense. But I would focus more on the task part of that question. And so I would focus more on what kind of things is that job asking you to do? What kind of skills and qualifications are they asking for? And can you demonstrate that from the work that you've done? So I hope that's helpful. And then there was a couple other questions down here. Is there a specific resume or cover letter format that we should use? Great question. That's my next section, so I will get to that. Would it be most appropriate when applying to jobs that are considered a career? Would it be most appropriate when applying to jobs? If you don't mind clarifying that question, I'm not exactly sure what you're asking. So if you don't mind clarifying, I would be happy to answer that question for you. But thank you. Those were really good questions. So, okay, so she clarified and said, relating to the skills section, skills sections, and again, I'm going to cover this a little bit in my next section, but skills sections and summary sections are really important when you are doing career pivots, because that is a really good way to help you to clearly tell that reader, this is where I've gotten the skill that you're asking for, even though to you it might not be a very obvious match, but let me explain to you where I've gotten them from. Okay, so I see your other questions down there, and I will get to those in my next Q&A if that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and get through some of this content on the resume. So we'll talk a little bit about resumes, and then I'll take another pause for questions, and then we'll do some cover letter stuff. So there was definitely a question there about resume formats. And so what I have found is most preferable to recruiters, and what I think really showcases transferable skills for career changers the best, is definitely the functional resume. Wait, no, I'm sorry. That was supposed to say combination resume. So that is my fault. But the combination resume is a hybrid. And so it focuses more on the work history and your relevant skills. When you look at a very traditional functional resume, so this is your cue to proofread all of your materials before you submit them. So when you are thinking about a functional resume, that really puts most of the focus on these skills and less of the focus on your work history and how you got those skills. Recruiters are interested in definitely in what are the relevant skills that you have, but also they want to see proof, right? It's not just enough to say, these are the skills I have, please trust me that I've actually done work, right? And that I've been employed. So give them some context of where you've gotten them. So there's a few things that I have here on this list. I won't run through all of them, but you can see them. And I will also send these slides out afterwards to everybody that came today, so you can have this to look over if you would like to afterwards. But really, a combination resume tells the employers what skills you have and where and when you got them, because that is really important. Stay to 1 to 2 pages. I know this is hard, especially if you have a lot of experience. But again, we can work together one-on-one and whittle that down. I've been doing resumes for a long time, and I might know some magic tricks that you haven't thought about before with Word, so we can definitely work on that. But what you really want to do is focus on what's the most relevant information to this role, again, like we were talking about before with your transferable skills, and really make that the highlight of the focus part of your resume. After 2 pages, you're just, unless you're looking at a CV, which certain industries like teaching and other maybe research roles and educational stuff, they're going to be looking for a CV, which is multiple pages. You can put all kinds of stuff on there. But really for most other industries, you're going to be wanting to keep that pretty concise, because after 2, you're just losing their attention. Show and tell. So state your relevant skills and demonstrate them with specific experiences that prove that you have that. And you can do that in bullet points. Definitely have, for career switchers and for folks that have a lot of experience, definitely have a professional summary and or relevant skills section. You can call these all kinds of different things, but it should be the same general gist of information. There are a lot of other different resume sections that you can put on there, but I have an example in just a second about a really basic sort of combination resume, and that you can sort of glean from. I also have a really good cover letter and resume guide for experienced folks that I will send out with the slides afterwards, so it gives a lot more detail and context to what we're talking about. When you are thinking about your resume format, I always recommend people to avoid fancy fonts and templates. Now, with this being said, you can certainly feel free to have 2 different versions of your resume. If you would like to have a resume that that looks a little bit nicer, maybe it's got a little bit of color on it, or, and some people are using Canva now to create resumes, which look really nice. That might be more appropriate for maybe networking context, say if you're getting ready to have an informational interview or just a chat with a professional, maybe somebody that you've been connected with that wants to see some context about your experience. That might be a really good one to send them. But applicant tracking systems, which are softwares that a lot of companies and organizations use to scan resumes and cover letters for keywords and key phrases, applicant tracking systems don't really like, templates and fancy fonts and stuff like that. So you just got to keep it kind of simple for that. Templates, that's sort of a personal preference thing. I think that they are more difficult often to manipulate, things like spacing and margins, and sometimes where things are located in your resume. So it doesn't give you a lot of wiggle room when you want to make changes down the road. And resumes really should be a living, breathing document that changes as you change or in your professional life. And so templates sometimes don't offer that flexibility. The last tip I have down here for your format is have a master resume. And master resume really is, it is your own personal document that you use. You don't really use it to apply for anything, but it's your running list of all of those things, right? All of those things that could go on your resume. Volunteerism, leadership, job information, all of that stuff can go on a master resume, and it can really be helpful to you when you go to apply for things. Because when you're putting relevant information on a resume, sometimes you might need to copy and paste. Maybe some things are relevant for some jobs, maybe some things aren't. And so your master resume will give you that housing of information, so you don't have to recreate bullet points or think, oh my gosh, when did I work at that particular place? So as I said earlier, here's a very, very basic example. And this would look different with every individual person. So this might not be the exact sort of format or template that you use, but it can give you a really good starting place to think about. I always recommend that the professional summary and or the relevant skills section goes at the top, because you're trying to catch the reader's attention, right? And this is your best way to summarize this information for them and tell them the most important stuff that they need to know right up front. It's not going to do you a ton of good if you put it at the bottom, especially if you have a 2-page resume, because they might not get to it. Unfortunately, hiring managers are not going to, spend 5 minutes getting to know you. They're going to take probably about a minute or so to scan your resume and see if you have some relevant information that they need. So put that stuff at the top. And then your work history and education can go. Typically with education section, if you're currently in a degree program, I definitely recommend putting that more towards the top. But if you've had enough work experience that really sort of, at that point, the education was, okay, good, we did that. That's important to have for this role. But really what speaks more to my abilities is my work history and your skills. The education can go down towards the bottom. So I wanted to share a slide just to sort of dive into the professional summary and or the skills section. And the summary I do, and again, the resume guide that I have has a lot more detail about creating a summary section. I don't want to spend a ton of time on this, although it is important because we do have we have some really good questions coming in. And I do have some cover letter stuff that I wanted to make sure we got to. But the summary section can be thought of, everybody, when you're thinking about your transferable skills, you sort of have like buckets of skills, right? Communication skills, you have interpersonal skills, maybe you have, if you're in a certain industry, maybe you have some really high technical skills. Think about the summary as a place to talk about those buckets of skills that you have. So yes, full disclosure, this is from mine, an older version of my resume, but in my industry, it's important to talk about what types of students and clientele that you worked with in terms of advising, program, project management. So those are sort of big buckets of skills that I have, including the technology stuff and sort of all of the systems that I've used before. So think about, this might take a little bit of brainstorming activity when you're thinking about your summary, but really trying to work through what are some of those broader areas that you have that would be relevant to that employer. And then the highlighted skills section can include soft and hard skills, but that would be sort of, you're not as verbose with those, but you're just sort of giving them a good snippet of those skills. So a little bit about bullet points. I think I think after this slide is when I'm going to pause for questions, and I see we have some good ones coming in. Bullet points sometimes for some people are the hardest thing on a resume. It's the most challenging that I find people, once you get things organized the way you want it organized and your format good, bullet points are the things that take some really good thought. So I wanted to spend some time talking about those because, again, those are really where you can start to incorporate transferable skills. So bullet points really are it is not a listing of I did this, 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 and this in my jobs, right? It is a balance of showing your skills and strengths with the tasks that you did. And when you're thinking about, I've seen some resumes where they have like a half a page of bullet points. You're more likely to lose the reader's attention that way. So thinking about, I don't know if there's really a magic number for bullet points, but really when you think about them, think about what's most important and relevant to this role and what they're asking for, and what do they need to know. Sort of like when we were talking about job descriptions earlier, about they usually list the most important ones towards the top. Ask yourself, if the hiring manager could only read just a few bullet points, which ones do they need to know? Use that as your gut check to then prioritize how they're listed. And again, you want to explain your impact. This is not just a task list. Because one of the things to keep in mind is that, you know, this is oftentimes, your resume and cover letter are oftentimes the first time that you ever get to explain to somebody why you're a good fit for that role. And so you want to make sure that you are specific enough and you're giving them enough information to say, look, I have this skill and let me prove it to you. When you are thinking about breaking down your bullet points, a really good formula, if you will, because oftentimes when things feel a little bit overwhelming, just breaking it down to baby steps is a little easier. So thinking about an action verb, those are very important. The task and the result and accomplishment is really important there. So with bullet points, what you want to really do is be specific but concise. Use the correct verb tense. I've seen so many resumes, and it's a really easy mistake to make if your dates are in the past tense and your verbs are in the present tense. That's a really easy mistake to make, but it's a really easy one to fix too. And people that are hiring managers and that are on hiring committees, they read enough resumes where that would be something that they really pick out. And so those are just a few pointers for bullet points down there. I don't think I included it here, unfortunately, but one thing that's helpful for me, I like acronyms and things that make things easy to remember. So when you're thinking about writing a bullet point, think about CAR. Challenge, action, and result. So these are the things that you would want to address, and it sort of relates to the formula there. But challenge, action, and result. So challenge, you know, every job responsibility that one has, no matter what the job is, every task that you have with that job is a challenge, if you think about it. So for example, one of the responsibilities of my job is providing content like this. The challenge for that is, what kind of content do I need to provide? When do I need to provide it? How often, right? So thinking about the challenge that you have in front of you with your job responsibilities, the action would be, what steps did you take to address that challenge? And then the results, so what happened with that? Can you quantify anything, or did you, increase somebody's knowledge of something, whatever that is. The last thing I have down here is, when you are writing bullet points, ask yourself a few questions to make sure that you're on track. So is it kind of a big deal? Which means, is this relevant to the skills I'm trying to demonstrate? Did you make an impact, or did you improve something, or did you solve a problem? Sort of relating to the challenge thing, and this could demonstrate your accomplishments. And does this make sense for me to include here? So is it either a core responsibility of your job, the role that you're talking about, or is it relevant to the role that you're applying for? Okay, so again, you should probably, edit your stuff before you send it out. I should have looked at this before I finalized everything today. This is the slide that I wanted to include. So CAR and action. So over there, you have a little bit of an example, how somebody sort of works through the CAR example. And so hopefully that's a little bit helpful. And again, I'll send out the slides so you can see everything. And now I see we do have some questions that came in, so thank you very much. And I will take a sip of water and I will get to your questions. Okay, so we had a few. If a position is clearly a significant pay cut versus prior career position, what can be put in a cover letter to HR to help HR not discount you? Okay. Yeah, feeling like you're looking a little bit overqualified, I think is what you're asking about. That's always sort of a gray area, sort of a sticky situation, but it depends on everybody's individual situation. Why are you coming to this place? Why are you applying for this particular job when you do, on paper, at least seem overqualified? And so I'm happy to also talk to you about your individual situation offline if you would like, but I think general advice for that would be, helping them understand why you're here applying for that. Are you looking, is this part of a career transition and maybe you have to sort of take a step back to get where you eventually want to be? That might be important for the reader to know, because otherwise they could come up with their own assumptions on that. And, usually when people assume things, it's not necessarily in our favor, right? So I think helping the reader just sort of understand how you got there might be really important. And again, like, happy to talk to you offline if you would like about your specific situation. Let's see, we have a few more. How do you ensure the hiring manager actually sees your resume and the computer doesn't sort it out? Okay, great question, legit. It's really good when you're talking about applicant tracking systems. So again, when you're trying to get past the bot, right, trying to get past the software system, focusing, that's where understanding the job description comes in. That's why I had that slide up there. You really want to try to figure out, what are they asking me for? What kind of relevant skills and qualifications do I need to talk about? Because when you do so applicant tracking systems, it works to make a match between your documents and the job description through keywords and phrases. The good news is nowadays, with the way that artificial intelligence has really evolved, it can sort of suss out ideas from keywords and phrases that you're using. It used to have to be, way back in the day when these first started, it used to have to be an exact match. If I didn't see this word and this word, then you were not going to pass the system. So it is far more intelligent than it used to be, but focus on those keywords and phrases from the job description and make sure that your application materials are reflecting that. So we have a few more. How are HR professionals treating resume gaps, quote unquote, due to the virus and family leave? Yes. It really depends on the individual organization and what their sort of values are with that. But I would say, on the whole, if you, again, use that cover letter as a way to explain to somebody, what's going on with that. But I would say that on the whole, I found that more recruiters and HR managers are much more understanding that life happens these days. But on the other hand, you do want to give them a little bit of explanation. You don't have to go into detail, maybe 1 or 2 sentences, what's going on with that. I had to take some time off to take care of family or whatever it is. And again, you don't have to give them all the details of it, but I think just giving them some explanation, because again, if they are left to their own assumptions, it might not be great. So hopefully that was helpful. How detailed should education be? I was a teacher and took a lot of classes at various colleges. The detail of the education section really sort of depends on what kind of role are you applying for? What are they asking for? So if it's important for them to know maybe specific classes that you took, if this was a sort of a recent, educational pursuit, maybe having a relevant coursework section in there. So that might help get around what you were thinking about there. If you were taking a lot of classes at various colleges, you could just list relevant coursework, and they could see what you've taken across the colleges. So hopefully that was helpful. Okay, somebody asked about an example for bullet points, and I didn't, because I was clearly did not look at my slides the way that I should have before. The example, the car in action, that is an example of a bullet point with an action, verb, task, and result. And so I'll send out the slides afterwards, and so you can sort of see that. And I'll also send out my resume guide, which I think has some more information in there. Okay, what if you don't have something where you see car results? So for example, teaching, right? So not everything fits into a really nice, pretty box. But I think the point with the car example and the bullet points is really, teaching is, you can definitely get, show accomplishments, and you can show, productivity through bullet points where you don't, you maybe don't have a specific, something that's quantified with a specific number. So I think it's still very much relevant for like teaching, and you can quantify things without having really specific numbers. I mean, I am happy to talk to you offline, because some of these questions, they're good in general, but a lot of times resumes and cover letters are just really specific to your own situation. Okay. So a couple more here, and then I'm going to answer these questions, and we're going to move on to the cover letter stuff, because I do want to be mindful of everybody's time today. Do resumes really need to be one page? Fitting 18 years of experience on a short resume while also including enough details? Totally understand. One page, no, right? I mean, like I was talking about earlier, I would say 2 full pages. Just what I have sort of found and what I've heard from recruiters that I talk with is that, okay, but a 3rd page, you're just, are they going to get to that? And, you're sort of losing their attention. So again, we can work on things like, you can do little tricks like changing your margins to 1/2 inch all around. You can change font size. You can change the types of font. You can work on the spacing. You can get your contact information all in one line at the top, so that sort of saves you some space. There are certainly some little things that you can do to try to save yourself some space there and fit a lot of stuff into 2 pages, especially with a lot of experience. And the other thing to keep in mind too is that you don't have to, when you're listing your work history, you don't have to list every single thing, right? So if you've had a lot of experience, like you seem to have, maybe focusing on the last 10 to 12 years of work experience. And so seeing where that gets you, and fitting everything in one page is sort of a dance, and something you might have to play around with a little bit. Okay, so I see there's a couple more questions in there that I will get to, but I'm going to move on to the cover letter portion really quickly. So I did want to say a little bit about these. Yes, they are important. A lot of times with job postings, they maybe say that cover letters are optional, or, they might not even say up front, they'll say just submit resume. If you're in an application portal for a job that you're applying to, and they make you upload your resume, which they will probably always do that, and then they give you the option for other documents or optional documents, you can use that space for a cover letter. I always tell people, if this is a job that you feel like you can make a really good case for yourself, and you are, really interested in, take the time to do a cover letter, because if it's optional, you might be one of a few or just the only applicant that actually submits one. And that can do a lot for your application and move it forward, because it really demonstrates your sincere interest in this. So what do? They show your value and brand. This is a way for you, again, to sell yourself. This is a way to drill down into some details on that resume, to pick out, 2 to 4, usually some of those top skills from the job description that they're asking for, that you can prove and say, this is why I'm a good fit for this. I like to think about cover letters in terms of a thesis statement, right? A research paper. So when you have a thesis statement, it's not just enough to say, I believe this, right? You need to show them. You would never get good marks on a paper if you did not provide your sources and your bibliography to say, this is where I got this from. So think about your cover letter sort of in this way. And again, the cover letter guide that I will send out has a lot more detail on this, so it'll give you a lot more context to understand it. But you really want to provide the reader with supporting evidence. This is where you say, if they're looking for A, B, and C skills, and you can really prove those, that's what you use to address in your cover letter. You want to make the connection between how your experience is relevant to this specific position. So I think this is my last slide, but I did want to say just a little bit, because if it's been a while, or maybe you just wanted to do a little cover letter refresh, or maybe you really haven't had to write many cover letters, a lot of people often ask me, okay, that's cool. Like, I understand what you're talking about in a cover letter, but I don't know where to start. So this is part of my cover letter guide that I've taken out and put in the slide. So what you really want to start with thinking about is list the qualifications for the job description. So again, in that understanding job description slide, you were trying to sort of figure out from them, what are they asking for that's really important to them. So some examples there, you know, some years of management experience, progressive leadership. You can also start to identify the soft skills that they're looking for. And again, using the word cloud to try to figure that out. Once you have that brainstormed and jotted down, and then number 2 there, brainstorm your roles and your experience. And this would be, you know, referring to your transferable skills. See where the overlap is between what they're asking for in the job description and what you can provide. And then from that list, choose 2 or 3 qualities and skills from that highlight why you are ideal. And focus on ones where you either have had big results or you have had enough experience where you can definitely have, you know, 1 or 2 or more stories, you know, specific examples to demonstrate that skill. And that's what you want to use in the body of your cover letter to focus on. And then I always recommend to people, you know, it's like sort of like when you sit down to write a paper, if you start at the very top with your name, sometimes you get writer's block that way because you feel like, okay, I have to come up with the perfect opening. Cover letter is sort of the same thing. So I always recommend to people, you know, once you work through the 1 through 3 here, start by writing the body paragraphs. The opening and closing paragraphs can come later. Those are important, certainly, but they're not sort of like the heart of your cover letter. So I would start writing the body paragraphs first, and then you can fill in the other paragraphs and the other content. Okay, so that is the end. And I do see we have a few more questions that came in, so that's awesome. And depending on how it goes, I mean, if we end up going a little bit past 12, I'm happy to hang on, or a little bit past 1, I'm happy to hang on if you feel like you need to jump off. Or if you've got other things going on, please feel free to, but please know that I really appreciate you being here. So somebody asked, how do you explain getting fired? That is a great question. That is a delicate situation always. That is something that is very individual to you and your situation. And again, that is something that I am more than happy to have a conversation with you in a one-on-one advising appointment, or anybody for that matter, who's been through that, and how do you explain that? Because it is a very delicate situation. You know, you want to have a balance between, it sort of depends on what happened, right? I mean, sometimes those are an escalated situation that's like a result of difference of opinion between you and the management, or, you know, sometimes it is somebody that just made an egregious mistake. Maybe the company, you know, didn't handle it well. There's a lot of things that could go on with this kind of situation. But I think it's a balance when you explain it between, you know, trying to paint yourself in the best light possible while also, you know, sticking to the truth. And so I know that wasn't really specific. Hopefully that was helpful, at least getting started to think about it. But again, happy to have a chat with you, because those situations are, you know, they're very delicate, and it does take some consideration on how do you explain that. So somebody asked about the artificial intelligence that HR systems have. Will applying to many roles within one organization hurt your chances, as you may not look focused? Okay. I have totally been there before. When I had first graduated, when I first finished my master's degree, I was most certainly on the job hunt. And there was a really large state institution that I applied for many jobs at. And I think the thing to keep in mind with that is, especially when you're dealing with an organization that has a software system that scans the resumes, I wouldn't worry so much about worrying that you're applying for too many at the position, or too many positions at that company, that you're going to look unfocused, because if you're applying for stuff within different departments, and you can usually tell that through the job description about what department it is, or maybe doing some sleuthing on the internet to see how they're organized. Usually that's not going to be as big of a deal as you might think it is, because once it gets past the software system, it's going to go to the hiring manager, and those are going to differ between departments. The other part of this question was, is reposting an attachment if you found an error seen as a weakness? No, not at all. I mean, I think it's good. It shows that you are very thorough about the things that you submit. So if you do, I think what you're asking about is your own documents. So if you submit documents and you found an error, if they're using an application portal, you don't necessarily want to reapply for that position through the portal, but what you could do is try to, you try to figure out who the contact in the HR department is, and send them an email and say, look, I applied for this posting on this date. This is my confirmation number or whatever. If it's acceptable, I would love to submit this resume or whatever in place of my documents, because I realized there was an error on it. I think that shows a lot of thoughtfulness. So you could try that. Some more questions here. When application system is very long and tedious, how much are HR professionals looking at what is put in the input boxes versus our truly formatted resumes? Those are some specific details that I don't know everything about with that, but my recommendation, and yes, it is very tedious, and I have totally been through this before, but be thorough in both of those places. Be thorough in the input boxes where you, I guess, copy and paste or you write information in, versus the formatted resumes. I think it depends on your situation. I've been through applications before where I have just, sort of, you might have other opinions about this. I've copy and pasted stuff from my resume to the input boxes if it was what they were asking for. Because a lot of times when it gets to the hiring committees and to the hiring manager, to the departments that are looking for that role, I think, they'll send all parts of your application, but when they distribute your application materials, usually what most people are looking at is the resume. So I hope that's helpful. Somebody asked about relocating. Yeah, I mean, I think that, again, it's sort of like the gaps in employment when you're taking time off. I think people totally understand, that relocation happens often. A best case for it, I mean, I think it, again, depends on your individual situation, but if it's something that's tied to, a family move, maybe you were following a spouse or partner, and that was just, you had to relocate. So I think that's a really easy thing to explain to somebody. It's really easy to understand. Hopefully that was helpful. I'm going to take a sip of water real quick. So we have a few more questions. It looks like we have a few more minutes left before 1, which is awesome. So I'll try to get through them. What skills or personality characteristics qualifications are from your experience the most sought after from employers? Okay. So sort of the big ones, that's okay. You know what? Actually, one of my professional development organizations that I'm in, NACE, it does a survey every year of employers, and it sort of assesses like what are the most important things that you're looking for. I will try to get a hold of that information and send that out to you all in the follow-up from this presentation today. But in general, those are usually communication is at the communication is at the top of the list, right? Teamwork is really, really important. Technical skills is gaining, and technical skills can, for some roles and industries, look like, okay, can you figure out Word and PowerPoint and Excel, right? Just figure out how to do the most basic stuff in it. Sometimes it's a lot more in depth and maybe looks at specific software, but technical skills is important. Can you fire up a computer and figure out how to work on it? So communication, interpersonal, teamwork, technical. Again, I will verify that with what I find from NACE and send that out to you. But those are pretty standard, typical ones that they would be looking for. Let's see. Due to privacy rules around severance and non-disclosures, can prospective employers discover that you were terminated? So the best way that I know how to answer this is, and I think, I think that we should probably have a conversation one-on-one, because it sounds like you're in a situation, but happy to chat with you about that. In my experience and what I know, and again, I don't know everything, but I do know, I've sort of been around the block a few times. They really can't go to a certain database and run your information to see if you're collecting unemployment. Really, the only way that I know that they would know that is if they talk to your former employer that you are collecting unemployment from, and they told them that. So yeah, that's a delicate situation, and happy to chat with you, but no, there's not like some database that they can look at to see like who's been terminated lately. They would really only know that if they actually talk to the former employee or employer, the HR department. Following up with an online application, that's a really good question. So typically what I say for that is, if you haven't gotten, so if it's an online portal and they're using an applicant tracking system and you have not gotten an automated message, in a day or two that says thanks but no thanks, because that's the system's way of unfortunately telling you like, hey, you didn't pass the system to go to the hiring manager. So if you haven't gotten that, what I usually recommend with any kind of follow-up, online portal or not, if they have a deadline on that job description, if it says, it's due by, August 31st, don't call them before that because they're still collecting applications. So I usually recommend in that case, if you have a deadline, follow up in about a week and a half or so, 2 weeks to see how things are going. If you don't have a deadline, and you have applied, I would still give it about a week and a half to 2 weeks to follow up with them, and just checking in to see, if they know when they're going to start calling candidates for interviews, and if they have any idea of how the hiring process is going. So hopefully that's helpful. Looks like we have a couple more that I'll get to, and then we'll kind of wrap it up. Is it always a negative to have gaps in employment? No, it's not. Is it a bad thing to maybe want to have a break versus jumping right into that role? Yeah, that's totally understandable. It's not a bad thing, again, like I said earlier, to have a gap in employment. But what I do think is important is not leaving the reader up to their own assumptions and explaining to them what's going on with that. Again, I think people in general are pretty understanding, but letting them know like, hey, I did take a break. This is what's going on. Like, this is why I took a break from it. Does career services one-on-one help somebody who's in a career field but ready to look for something different? Absolutely. Yes. Happy to talk to most of the people that I chat with one-on-one certainly are looking for some kind of a career transition, whether that's gradual or something that's a little bit more different than what they currently do. So please do get in touch. Happy to chat. Is it ever all right to call HR about a position? Of course it is. If you want to give me some more detail on what you're asking about that, but no, absolutely, you can call it. But yeah, if you have questions for them, I wouldn't necessarily call HR to ask hey, can you tell me about this specific thing that you listed in your job description? Can you tell me more about that? Because a lot of times HR is they're just sort of the middleman between collecting applications and getting onto the hiring manager. So they might have specific questions about, or they might have specific details about the actual role itself if you had that. But if you had sort of other questions like, how does their hiring process work? Or, I've called HR before about, hey, do you have any idea of when they would start calling interviews for this role? So some of those questions are good to ask them. And again, happy to chat offline if you have more specific questions about that, but I hope it was helpful. So it looks like that was the end of our questions, and I really appreciate that. Oh, so I'm looking at the chat here, and I wanted to make sure that I got to as many as I could. So we'll just do a couple more minutes. Somebody asked, diversifying action verbs. Yes, I know I didn't really explain a lot about that, but Michael, when I was talking, what I meant by that was just making sure that you're not having the same one a lot in your resume. So if you have coordinate, 5 times in a row, or, if you have coordinate a lot, think about diversifying that. Thesaurus.com is my favorite website for this, looking up a word and seeing what are some other words for that. So hopefully that was helpful. Well, I will go ahead and wrap stuff up since we're a few minutes over today, but I really, really appreciate you all being here. Loved chatting with you. You have really good questions, and really do appreciate it. So I will sign off for now. Again, my contact information is up there on the screen. Feel free to reach out, call me if you would like to chat one-on-one. I will get you set up with Spider Connect, and we can move forward that way. Also, if you're interested, just one other thing that I'll plug for you, keep an eye on alumni, the alumni website, alumni.richmond.edu, and check out their events page, because in a couple weeks, so I've been doing webinars on Mondays, so 2 Mondays from now, I will have another webinar on job search related topics. So keep an eye out for that, and take care for now. And I really appreciate you all being here, and thank you. I will talk to you soon.